My first session with a clinical psychologist, he fell asleep. I woke him up, like he woke up on his own 5 minutes before the end of the session. He's just like, oh, I'm like, welcome back, dude. And he's like, what do you want? Like, what pills do you want? What do you want? And I was like, dude, I don't want anything from you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, for showing up. I'm your host today, Max Bush. I'm the head of customer engagement for Sharp Performance. With me here, I have Steve Bunting, our head of coaching. Really the most important job in this company. We're going to get into his background. We're going to talk about, how he got here. Steve, please introduce us. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to sitting in that chair right there.
Yeah, thanks, Max, and thanks for the gracious words on my introduction as the head of coaching. It's a lot of pressure for me each day to do a good job, but I'm very grateful for it. Prior to kind of getting into this space, as much of our team, I was a special operations veteran. I did 11 years in the Navy as a special operations independent duty corpsman. It's kind of one of the least known parts or functions of special operations, and that being that I'm a Navy corpsman by trade. Mm-hmm. I actually chose to go through kind of the Force Recon pipeline, went to the 18 Delta course, Special Forces medic course, to be a next level kind of medical provider, and served with the Marine Corps the whole time. So I often get, kind of joked around about that I'm a Marine, but I'm a Navy dude by boot camp. But outside of boot camp, I was with the Marine Corps pretty much the whole time. I'm very grateful for that. As I transitioned from the military, I actually ended up becoming a marriage and family therapist, which kind of segued into my fascination with mental health, mental performance, and then ultimately landed me in this seat in front of you today.
And we're very, very lucky to have you. Before we get too far into the weeds of your profession and Sharp, how did young Steve go from wherever you were growing up? Tell us a little about where you grew up, what that was like, and kind of the path to getting closer to joining the military.
Yeah, I would love to. The path for Steve Bunting in the early beginnings was a bit difficult, Max. It was a tough one. I grew up a pretty tough life, as many of us have. I think, right. That tough lifestyle kind of leads a lot of us into these types of work. But my mom and my dad got separated when I was really little. Actually, I was born here in California. People don't really realize that, but I was born in Oceanside, and my mom and my dad split when I was about 3 years old. My mom takes me and my brother across the country. We actually rode a Greyhound bus from Oceanside, California to Birmingham, Alabama, where my mom had a sister, my Aunt Lisa, and she decided to kind of, go on an adventure of her own and find maybe an easier way of life. So she moves us out there, and I kind of started there in Birmingham, Alabama with a single mom. She was a cashier at the local Chevron for much of my, developmental years. And I grew up in a small trailer park there in Birmingham. Got to learn a lot there growing up in the South. And actually, I'm pretty grateful for it, dude. Like, if I would have stayed out here in California, I'd be better at surfing for sure. Probably be better at skateboarding as well. But, I got to learn how to play outside there. There's a lot of kind of latchkey kids type stuff. I was sharing with Andrew on the ride over here. It's like, I didn't really have a lot of screen time because we didn't have cable and the TV sucked. So me and my brother Mitch,
3 channels.
Yeah, me and my brother Mitch, who was my ride or die, we would just go outside and cause hell, dude, cause havoc, right? If there's any trouble to get into, we found it. But it was like every day was an adventure, whether it was a school day or not. We just kind of grew up playing in the creek. We weren't playing in the creek catching crawdaddies. We were hopping. There's a train that ran behind the trailer park and went down to this rock quarry. And in that rock quarry, they dug down to the water table. So it ended up filling up with water. So we'd hop the train and ride it all the way down to the rock quarry. It's 5 miles away. When we were kids, it was 20 miles. It felt like a whole half day's journey. And we'd hop off the train. Sometimes it was going too fast. We'd have to tuck and roll. I was practicing my PLF. And then we would go up to the rock quarry and swim until the cops got called on us or whatever it was. Yeah. And that was just one day in the adventure of Steve and Mitch, my brother. Yep, for much of my young life.
Did it feel, because us both being from the Special Forces background, you run into thousands of guys, and a lot of them have a similar background, right? It's a tough upbringing, poverty, people kind of overcoming adversity, and I think that's if I could pick out a single indicator of why a person is going to make it through a selection training pipeline or not, I would aim back at the amount of times they had to fail and the amount of perseverance that they had to go through at a young age. Were you aware that you were living in poverty? Did it feel hard? Like, what was that like for just, going back to your young mind? What was that?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about it, I'll give a lot of credit to the trailer park itself. Because in that, I think anyone that kind of grows up in the projects, we didn't go straight to the trailer park. There was some project living and things like that, HUD housing that we were in prior to getting there. But there was like almost like its own little community. There was a bunch of kids and we all kind of sucked together, right? And it just made it a little bit easier to tolerate. I think if I was kind of suffering on that level and just like the things we had to do without on my own, it would have been a little bit more difficult for me. Right. But to be honest with you, Max, it's pretty transparent for us. And we all kind of knew where we were. We saw the things that we had to see around us and we kind of bonded together. And in that, I didn't really feel too alone in that. It's like we had a community of people that were kind of suffering in their own way. But I was aware of it, Max. I was, man. Yeah. I was aware of the little things of like not having a dad, at our birthday parties, like not knowing my dad, kind of growing up with poverty. I don't think it wasn't until later on, maybe junior high, before I even had my first name brand pair of shoes. Yeah. They were a pair of Adidas Oswego's, I remembered. I thought I was the fastest runner on earth. I could jump higher and, we did much of our shopping from the thrift store. Yeah. Right. And I'd like to say that it wasn't something I was aware of, but I was, man. Yeah. And it really did affect my like self-confidence. So, instead of kind of beating myself up over it, there was a chip on my shoulder where I had a lot to prove. I was a little bit of an angry kid, right. And I had a lot to prove, and it drove me a long way.
It is the hard things, but then being put in a place, whether it's just you as a human being or having a mentor, watching your mom raise you and your brother and watching her overcome, being the cashier at the Chevron and then realizing that you wanted something different. And so you've been through the hard things, you're living in poverty, and then the next step is what? Like, what are the series of events that lead to you being called to take this adventure, joining the Navy and, seeing the world? Around
my 10th grade, 11th grade year, they decided they wanted to sell the trailer park, right? And they didn't care. They wanted to build this Kia car dealership there instead, right? So they essentially come to us, make everyone a bunch of deals that they're going to kind of pay you a certain amount of money for your small single wide trailer, but they politely get out of there as soon as possible. So that ended up, creating a situation where me and my brother went to live with my grandparents. So along that, growing up, my grandparents actually relocated from California to Alabama to kind of support us, and they were ready for a change of life as well. So in my junior year, I transferred from the school that I was going to near Birmingham out to their house, which is a bit out in the suburbs. My grandpa's one of the greatest male role models I've had. Just a good old Southern boy working in a machine shop since he was 14. Just real strong fundamentals when it comes to just what a gentleman is. And, I got to give him a credit as the lead male role model in my life for how I like to model myself as a man. But as I got there, the time started to draw nigh. Between the end of my 11th grade year and my senior year, it's like, hey, I can't live with grandma and grandpa forever. Right. Me and my brother were sharing a bed in their guest bedroom, and I just knew that wasn't going to be tenable. And I started to have to figure this out. So to be honest with you, I never thought about kind of joining the Navy, but I had some pretty formidable moments in high school where I watched 9/11 happen on TV. For whatever reason, the teachers knew exactly where the remote was and turned the TV on right at the right time. And I got to see like the second Twin Tower hit. So this was like a pretty influential part of my life where I was like, what the hell is going on? Right. Like, what is going on? I'm not too sure. Wasn't big on geopolitics, didn't really watch the news, but I know a lot of people were talking about the presidency and what was going on in a war. And I was very curious about that. But my brother was a year behind me. So, as I graduated from high school, wasn't really thinking military, but I started working. So I started working at a call center and very quickly realized like, that's not where I wanted to be either. Right. I was decently successful there, but I was like, is this where I'm going to be? Is this what life looks like? I'm watching the Battle of Fallujah on TV at the call center, and my buddy Myron was sitting next to me. He was a prior Marine. I was like, hey man, you were a soldier, right? And he's like, I wasn't a soldier, I was a Marine. I was like, whatever, same thing, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, did you like it? He's like, I loved it. It was the best time of my life. Yeah. And I'm sitting there watching these tanks, roll through buildings in Fallujah, and I'm like, huh. So I remember I talked to my brother. He was a senior now at this time. And I was like, Mitch, what are you going to do? He's like, dude, the Marines came to school today and I did 20 pull-ups and they gave me a shirt and I'm going to be a Marine. I was like, oh man, seriously?
Greatest recruiting tool ever.
Yeah.
Dude. Have
yeah.
a kid
So,
do some pull-ups. That's it.
dude, next thing I know, he starts working out. He's lifting. He's doing pull-ups and running every day. He's getting jacked. He's getting more jacked than me. And I'm like, no, this can't work, right? My little brother can't get bigger than me. So I made an agreement with Mitch and I was like, hey, let's join the military together. I was like, I'll wait for you. And then whenever you graduate, we'll go in on the buddy program. And I had this dream of just kind of going to boot camp with my ride or die.
Yeah.
And we're just going to go through the process together. And he's like, cool. So long story short on that, I end up getting into a fight with a Marine Corps recruiter, and he tries to fight me. So I'm standing there in this recruit office, and he flips his desk, and I'm like, you're crazy, dude. Yeah. So I walk out of the Marine Corps office. I walk in next door. The Navy office is right there, and I walk in there, and I'm like, hey, what's the closest thing you got to a Marine? And they're like, well, we got Navy corpsmen. And I'm like, well, what's that? They're like, well, it's the medics for the Marine Corps. And I was like, I'll do that. Like, slow your horses, bro. You don't get to just do that. One, you got to take a test to see if you're smart enough. I was like, oh, you got to be smart enough to do some of these things? Like, yeah. And then two, like, we got to see if there's availability. So I ended up betraying my brother in a sense that he was like, dude, I'm joining the Marine Corps. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to go to the Navy, and maybe like in some chance, we'll get paired up again. So I could become a Navy corpsman and kind of get paired up with your team, and maybe I'd get to be your corpsman. So I kind of created a little different path there. Yeah. And then that's, I started the process from there.
So did you feel like you were like taking that from your little brother? Like, all right, if he's doing it, I'm doing it. I gotta stick with my guy. Yeah,
well, it was tough because our whole life we were together, right? Every bit of hardship he endured, I endured. Like every bit of it was there, and it was like it was a pretty big step for me to go left and for him to go right. And but I will say that he was a catalyst of motivation for me to join, because if it wouldn't have been for him to actually like follow through with it and stick with it, I probably would have found some excuse not to join. But yeah, he played a huge role in my motivation to kind of go. We always did that. We went whenever we were together. So, I really leaned on that. Luckily for us too, we went to boot camp at the same time. So we're writing letters to each other under that nice, good old red light. He's over at Parris Island in South Carolina, and I'm in Chicago at the time going through boot camp. It was just kind of a really cool experience for us both to go through, almost like a rite of passage for us as men.
Right.
Yeah. It was, I think that's necessary for young men through their developmental years to have that. And we kind of consider that our rite of passage.
Right. Yeah. Especially without having a dad around, being able to be forced into an environment with so many male mentors, I'm sure was comforting in a way. I'm sure it was hard too, because you weren't used to it, but right.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a feral person. So I remember I got there, Max, and we're standing up at the recruit depot, and everyone's like calling people chief and senior chief and all this stuff. I did no pre-work. I had no clue about rank structure. So I was like, I guess if I just call everyone chief, that's going to get me through. Very quickly, I realized that was not going to work, right? I was like calling everyone chief. I'm like, yes, chief. Like, I'm not a chief. I'm like, oh, God, this is going to be a little bit more difficult than I imagined. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, chief is like a ranking structure. How tenured you are in your position, it's like the holy grail for most enlisted people in the Navy is to reach the chief level, and very few go beyond that. So you've made it there, right? You're doing the boot camp thing. After that, you go to A school and you become a corpsman. Talk about the most meaningful parts of that experience. Knowing that it's really hard and there's loss in there. Are there a couple of things that you can pick out that really are going to define the next 10 years of Steve's life based on what you know now?
For sure, man. Very early on, once you get into boot camp, I'm sure it was the same experience for you. They start showing you, they'll pull the men aside and they'll start showing you a video of people skydiving and shooting guns and like blowing stuff up and being in small teams. And they're like, hey, who wants to do this? And I remember being like, yeah, I do. But I remember looking around and seeing that not all the dudes' hands were up. And it was like kind of confusing to me. I'm like, wouldn't you all want to do that? And very quickly I started to realize, I'm like, oh, not everyone wants to do this type of stuff. Right. And then very quickly in the Navy, they start segregating you. Who wants to go to BUDS? Who wants to be SWIC? Who wants to be a SARC? All these different things. And this was the first time I wasn't that kid with the thrift store clothes on. I wasn't the kid from the trailer park. I was like, I had a chance to be my own person and actually to start writing my own story. And any of those insecurities in me, like I grew up playing sports and played football from a young age and stuff, but I was like little till my senior year. I was like kind of a late bloomer, and I'm starting to like come into my body. I'm starting to get stronger. I'm growing. I'm eating good food every day. And it's like started to realize that I was like, yeah, actually Mike could do something else with my life. So I started, raising my hand every opportunity I got to start working down that special operations path. And in that, like I started that chip on my shoulder that I referred to earlier, that's like where I needed to like prove everybody that I could do it, that I was worthy, that I could be a man, I could do all these things. Because, deep down inside, those insecurities were there. That doubt was there. But at each step, as I started to make it into the pipeline, right, started to go to each school, I started to crush it, man.
Right.
Started to like really come into my own and started to like fill that void I had of insecurity about whether I could do this or be a man or not. And just overcoming that stuff alone, because you know how it is, man. 99% of it's prep.
Right.
99% of it's in your head. It's not even the physical stuff. And really me being able to sit with myself and look in the mirror and start remapping that negative self-talk, like really starting to affirm where I'm at and gain this confidence. Dude, it's like outside of any combat experience or anything alone, I needed that, man. Mm-hmm. I needed that confidence and that self-assurance that I just never had growing up my entire life. And it really started, as I started to catch momentum, I got used to being successful.
Yeah.
I started seeing that it was possible and I started doing it more. And I was very blessed in my career.
Out of all the things you just said, that the point that I hung on to the deepest is because what I experienced too is it's that moment where you put your clothes in the bin, right? And they're shipping it home, or they ask you if you wanted to throw it away. I said throw it away.
I think I did too.
I didn't want to be that person anymore. And the uniform is something that everybody who's a partner or a customer Sharp Performance can relate to. The uniform holds so much power because there's a lot of rank aside, there's a lot of equality in the uniform, right? You are that person, and you can show up to be that person who's wearing the uniform every day, and you can really define yourself around it. And it sounded like you just really thrived when you finally got a chance to be equal with all the other people who are around you, and that huge fulfillment and curiosity that comes along with like just being like everybody else.
And bro, they're feeding me 3 times a day.
Right.
There wasn't a single bologna sandwich given to me. Like I didn't have to worry about where I was going to sleep. The heat was on, dude. It was good, Max. I was like, I can do this, man.
Right.
Where everyone else is like wilting, I'm like, dude, this is nice. Like where I came from and like what I had to deal with, like I was very grateful like for every meal that I could just go to the, it's not the greatest food all the time, but man, it was there. And I was like so hungry, dog. I was so hungry. Now you couldn't feed me enough, had access to the gym. It was just like, dude, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be for the first time in my life.
Adversity. It's the hard stuff that kind of leads you in that direction. And then comes the really hard stuff, right? Now you're deploying. Talk about from the first deployment to the last, like how were those experiences changing you and shaping you? Where was your mental health and where was it going? And just kind of take us through, the fine bullet points of from that first one to the last one, and what that looked like, kind of going into the fire, as Campbell says.
Yeah, man. So, I think initially early on in my career, and I think it's something you can resonate with, it became a expectation management thing, right? I'm showing up to first recon. They had just gotten back from, Ramadi and Fallujah, and like there's all these war heroes, and I'm like just chomping at the bit, like when's my chance? Right. And in the military, you feel like every month that goes by, it's the sand slipping between your fingers. And a lot of that, like my distress in the beginning was that, like me feeling like I wasn't ever going to get to touch the dragon, and I just wanted to chase it so much. But I was very lucky in my career that I got to do a lot of different things. I did a MU, so I got to spend some time on a ship, kind of got to see the world and get to experience different things from Thailand to the Philippines to, Jordan, the Middle East, and really gave me some time to really dial that in because it was still a little bit feral at that point. So it gave me some time to mature to the point from like leaving recon and moving up to MARSOC. Right, I got up there when it was still the Marine Special Operations Battalion before they got renamed as the Raiders, and it was some big boy stuff. Right, I went from like having to just kind of get away and rest on my laurels and be good enough to realizing that I'm going from maybe a jogging pace to a running pace pretty quickly, and that I would need to kind of step up. And then the gravity of it hit me too, of the unique job that I have as the medic, how it's like I don't get to have a rest day. I don't get to like half-ass packing my gear and things, because the day that my, call sign's called, it's going to be a tough one. Right. And I had to be on my A game. So the gravity of having to show up for these Marines and know that like their life very well may be in my hands started to settle in on me. And, that pressure to become more professional in that was much greater. And I'm grateful for that experience as well. to be honest with you, Max, I never felt any depression while I was in the military, right? It was, well, not until later at the very end. I really felt like I was like pretty resilient. When I heard about people having mental health related issues, we had people that had to leave combat early or whatever for mental health issues. I never really understood it.
Right.
Like I had my own biases about it. You know, to be honest with you, I thought people like that were weak. I just didn't understand how you couldn't handle doing the job. Me and one of my best friends, Dan Brown, you know, he actually got to go to combat before me. He came back from a particularly difficult deployment in Singin. And I was like, Dan, how are you doing? Like, do you have PTSD? And he's like, no, bro. Like, what's that? He's like, oh, dude, you go to school to be a dentist for a long time, right? I'm like, right. He's like, do you think a dentist cries after they pull their first tooth? And I was like, no. He's like, exactly. We just pull teeth, bro. That's what we do. So that was kind of my mindset about it. He's like, yeah.
That's the most Marine Corps thing.
Yeah, we're going to do what we do, and there's no reason to cry about it or feel sad about it, right? And that carried me, you know, that overzealousness, that arrogance, you know, I did keep that mindset about it. But to be honest with you, probably, you know, with expectation management on my last deployment, I was in Guam, and I was on a task force. And that was the first time I was kind of becoming isolated again. I picked up chief, so I'm no longer in a team. I'm at the company level. I'm sitting in meetings all day long. And it was like really difficult, Max, to like have to sit with myself each day and to see the team pushing out and doing their different missions and me sitting there like kind of by myself. And that's when the first kind of sneaking suspicions of like maybe my mental health isn't so good started to arise.
The quiet time is the hardest time. And I'm sure everybody listening can resonate with that. You know, you become so addicted to the chaos. I mean, starting from your childhood, right? Chaotic, even though it seems normal, not knowing when you're going to get your next meal, living in a hard place, watching people struggle, and then taking that chaos into the military, which is also, it's structured, but an incredibly chaotic environment. It's an addiction, right? It's sometimes the quiet time feels like a punishment because you kind of need things to be heavy. You know, I used to feel myself starting fights with whoever was in my environment because stuff just was too calm. It didn't feel right. So then you reach that point, right? It's like I'm finally starting to feel the effects of the job. I really look at you as a healer who's called, right? It doesn't seem weird to me that you became a medic. Those hard experiences, those traumatic experiences make people naturally very empathic, feel other people's emotions at a higher level. And you obviously have that gift. Talk about that. Talk about like that transition between things are getting really bad, you're fighting your demons, and then like how do you come out of the other side, like to where you are now?
Well, that empathic part that you talk about, like I had that at a very young age because I was the oldest, and I'm a man. Obviously, I'm a boy at the time, and I had to step up in a big way, like kind of support my mom. So I almost took that role really, really early in life, where I'm like, I got to be the rock for the family, and I carried that with me for a long time. So in that kind of transition of that pressure, right, of like realizing that maybe I'm not the rock, right? I'm starting to realize that maybe carrying that load and like suppressing some of these feelings and having to wear it all and be this person for everybody, like kind of started to wear me down a little bit. Yeah. And in that transition, it was like I had to start learning about that and figure out different ways to kind of cope. Initially, my coping skills were booze, right? In the military, it's like not a big deal if after every day of work you went home and drank a bottle of Jack Daniels, but you could show up in PT that next morning or show up where you needed to be in the right uniform in the right place. It was like almost culturally accepted that that's what you would do. Right. Any opportunity you got to kind of drink, it was the opportunity to drink. After every mission, every debrief, there wasn't a can of beer in your hand during the debrief. Did you even do an op? Right? It just became this cultural thing that's like how we started to cope. And that's how I began to cope, you know, in those days of just like kind of drinking at the debrief to waking up from a blacked out night before. And oftentimes a horrific story of things that you may have done, right? Or trouble started to kind of creep in. The alcohol related incidences were sprinkled in there, which made my life a little bit more difficulty. And another part of awareness, Max, that like really was the most apparent for me objectively was that my family started to fall apart, man. Even though even if you asked me if I had a problem or if anything was wrong, I'm like, no, bro, I'm good. I'm Superman, right? But then I started to realize that like my relationship was crumbling before my eyes. You know, I had a kid along the way while I was in the military and started to see like even he didn't want to be around me so much. When daddy's around, everyone just starts acting weird. And I caught myself kind of living out of a bag for much of that career, I just kept I had a North Face bag that just stayed at the foot of my bed.
Right.
And I never really unpacked it. I'd wash clothes, throw stuff in there, but I was ready to go for the next training event or whatever it was. And I just became a pattern of that, almost a pattern of running from my issues and never addressing them. And it just started to add up. But I was like, came to a point, man, where I started to realize like things are like not well and they're falling apart around me.
What was the catalyst? Like, what was the final straw? Eventually, there's this shift that happened, you know, where you're realizing your true power, you're realizing your potential, your purpose. And then you take all of those experiences and you return back to the community you came from to teach them the things that you've learned along the way. So you just described probably a great metaphor, right? You keeping that bag packed, keeping, you know, your stuff, your emotions, compartmentalizing your experiences and keeping it kind of at the foot of the door. When does the bag get opened up? What does that look like? And how does that turn into, you know, you returning back to this community of people, giving them the gift of coaching?
Yeah. So I had a bad habit of blaming my job for my problems.
Right.
I had a bad habit when I was in the military of like always being a victim to like the job that I really signed up for and I loved. Mm-hmm. You know, any training event or whatever, I was a victim to it. You know, I developed this bad habit of telling my wife, yeah, I don't want to do it, but I got to go do this thing. And It just became this negativity, which really robbed me of being proud of ever accomplishing any of what I did. Right. So even when it came to me, like having to face the music of needing to work on myself, I did what I normally did and I just kind of ran from it. So I said, you know what? I'm going to leave the Navy because that's my problem. All of this is my problem. It's not me not taking care of myself or addressing or being accountable. It's the Navy. So I did that again. I said, you know what? I'm going to use the same method of running away and I'm going to run away from the Navy and my problems are going to be better. If I can just get away from this, everything's going to magically repair. So I do. I transitioned from the military. I actually, like I just picked up Chief Petty Officer, which is, I'm like at 10 years picking up Chief. Everyone around me is like, dude, what are you doing? Where are you going?
It's fast.
And I'm like, I got to go. But I don't, like, you're good, man. Like, you're a made man. You can stay here for the next 10 years and, like, live a good life. And I just didn't want it. I just felt like I had to get away from there. So I got out, and I like to joke, like, I did what any overzealous medic would do, right? Is I was like, I'm going to be a trauma surgeon now. So I'm going to get out, and I'm going to go to school, and I'm just going to be a trauma surgeon, and that's how I'm going to win. Right. That's how I'm going to repair all of this, and everything's going to be great. But as I got out, that transition became difficult, Max. It did. I had a whole group of friends. There was like almost like a mass exodus around this time of people that were just kind of burnt and were leaving the military. I had probably some of my best friends were all getting out at the same time. So we all transition out. I'm trying to figure out what this education thing is going to look like. I wasn't a good student, dude. In high school, I was a horrible student. It wasn't because I was dumb. It was just I was like really lazy. One, I lacked discipline. There's not much like parental oversight. And then two, everything was just like I didn't understand why I needed to sit in this desk and listen to these people. Like it's just like I felt like I needed to be somewhere else. Right. So for me to like take this plunge after being in the military for 11 years, I'm like, thinking I'm just going to jump into this academic environment. I grossly underestimated how difficult that transition was going to be, but I knew that I could do it. So I start chipping away at it, making a game plan of how I'm going to become a surgeon. I'm looking at it. This is years, man. I'm like, geez, it's going to take me 10 years to get where I'm trying to go. And the gravity of that started to chip away at me. Some of these demons that were kind of I've been keeping at bay start to kind of manifest. The relationship with alcohol and everything else is starting to like raise its head. And I'm sitting here in this library typing, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. So what do? I bet you can guess. Like I run again, right? And I go become a contractor, do that for a couple more years, do that for a few more trips back to Afghanistan. And Max, like I'd say if I had to say where it all came to a head, it was December of 2019, where I just gotten back from Afghanistan. It was a particularly rough deployment, and we lost a lot of dudes, and it was kind of a tough one for me. And every little bit of spark was in me was gone. I was a bit burnt. Right. My relationship was broken with my wife. My kids didn't want to be around me. And some of those friends that I left the military with, we lost them to suicide. Right. You know, something else I want to highlight too is, you know, I talk about my ride or die. My brother went through the Marine Corps. When he was on his first deployment in Iraq, he got blown up. He stepped on 2 155s buried in the ground and blew him 30 yards away. By the grace of God, he survived, but he got a pretty significant traumatic brain injury. Mm. And this was 2006, so they didn't really know what to do with him. So they ended up just shooting him out of the military. They med-boarded him, but they just didn't help him. When I first got out of the military, my brother was in Alabama, and he was not doing well. He was part of the VA mental health system on all kinds of pills, you know, from Vyvanse to antidepressants, and his life was spiraling around him. So, part of that game plan, and the fixer in me wanted to take him from Alabama and bring him to California, and he was going to be my ride or die again.
Yeah.
As I'm transitioning out, I was like going to lean on him and we're going to get each other right. But before he was able to make it out to California, he committed suicide, ended up taking his medication and just couldn't handle it anymore. It just seemed like those calls kept coming, Max, for like those few years. My buddy Dan that I talked about, the dentist story, ended up losing him to suicide as well. And it's just like the stories just kept coming, man. I ended up getting to meet my father along the way, and he ended up committing suicide as well. So it seemed like this grief and this pattern of loss just kept stacking up. And it seemed like everywhere around me, the universe was screaming at me like, hey, you got to start figuring this stuff out. Right. In December 2019, I'm sitting here after this deployment, resigned from contracting, and it's just like my life was chaos. You hit the nail on the head. I had become addicted to chaos, and everywhere I went that was peaceful, I created chaos, and I was tired, bro. I was tired. So tired. And I realized that all these other guys got tired too, and that's why they were no longer here. So I kind of had to start facing the music, reached out to the VA and just kind of started working that process.
Right.
And it was a miss, man. I'd show up to these meetings and they'd fall asleep in the middle of the session. My first session with a clinical psychologist, he fell asleep. I woke him up, he woke up on his own 5 minutes before the end of the session. He was just like, oh, I'm like, welcome back, dude. And he's like, what do you want? Like, what pills do you want? What do you want? And I was like, dude, I don't want anything from you.
Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, I just felt rage, to be honest with you, deep down inside. And then I just felt this buzz in my body I couldn't explain that was like driving me crazy, homie.
Yeah.
Driving me crazy. The insomnia started happening, the bad dreams, all the things that like are pretty cliche in textbooks, like it was starting to wear me out, man.
Yeah.
Starting to wear me out. Instead of giving up on that, I just kept plugging along with school and I kept trying my best, but I got introduced to some like veteran nonprofits.
Right.
And they started they paired me up with a coach that was like me. He was a dev group command master chief.
Yeah.
Right. And it was for the first time I was talking to someone and he had the same look in his eyes that I do. Like he just got it. And I felt like he got it.
Right.
I didn't have to explain everything. He wasn't crying from the stories I'm telling him. And he kind of just told me, he's like, Steve, this is just like kind of the cost of doing business.
Right.
Right. You want to be a gunslinger all this time. It's like, but you're a human being with biological limitations.
Right.
You've been running your nervous system ragged for, 14 years now. It's like, there's going to be side effects. He's like, but we could start working through this. And he started putting like that little bit of hope in me. Where for the first time, I was like, dude, maybe I can overcome some of this stuff. Maybe I can start chipping away at it. Started putting a name to it, like introducing me to things like operator syndrome, something we're so grateful to bring onto our program and share with people because it just puts a name to the feelings. We're not always the best at that, right? As empathic as I am, it's like I struggle with my own feelings and just sitting with them and realizing what was what and started working the path, dude.
Right.
Introduced me to meditation. When I first started meditating, Max, it was like pouring fuel on a fire. I thought it was crazy. It's like, there's no way I'm going to sit here with my thoughts like y'all are crazy if you think this is going to help me.
Yeah.
But it took time. The insomnia is really what did it for me. I started using it to go to sleep because I noticed I was like, when I didn't feel like losing my mind in the meditation, I'd fall asleep.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, maybe I can use this to go to sleep. And I started developing that practice that way. And I'd use it to put me to sleep at night. And I started noticing, I started feeling better, right? They were sprinkling all kinds of different techniques in there, right? Whether it just being awareness of my alcohol use, not moving my body like I should, getting back, working out, feeling good, eating better, curing my gut health and all these things. And that was really like a turning point for me where I realized like there's something to this mind-body connection.
Right.
My body started to get better. I had a bad back like you shared prior, like from all the jumps and being a pack mule for recon, carrying an 80-pound rock up and down hills, like with no regard to my biological limitations. And my back started to get better, man. The spasms stopped happening. Next thing I know, my wife, we're able to communicate again. We're actually having decent conversations that don't have to go to war every time.
Right.
And that relationship started to repair. My kids start to want to be around me again. And I was like, dang, dude, there might be something to this mind-body connection thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kept kind of, thought about it. I was like, dude, I don't want to be a surgeon anymore. Right. I don't want everything to be a nail and I'm a hammer. Like I think there's some nuance to this life. And I became very obsessed with that, like helping people figure that stuff out.
Yeah.
So then that's when I kind of got on the path of becoming a therapist.
The most unfortunate part about that story is it's so similar to so many other ones I've heard. The loss of family, loss of friends, really having to go through it, really having to hit rock bottom before you finally make that decision. And what I hope the audience takes from Steve's story is that it's not about one unique moment. It's not about, if you're a cop, the gunfight you got into. If you're a firefighter, it's the one fire. It's an accumulation of these stresses that start when you're young and they continue on throughout your career. It's the 10,000 little things that lead up to the point where your nervous system is just so fried that you just feel like you can't do it anymore. The patience that you once had is gone. The softness or the kindness that you need in your mind to go from one person to the next, from bad people to good people, that gets worn out. It's a muscle like anything else. And it sounds like you had just reached your absolute fatigue, right? Personal loss and work loss. But at some point, right, there are guys like you who take what you've learned and you return home with it. You became a therapist, but you have all of these very unique lived experiences, right? You can relate to anybody else who's been in high stress, high pressure situation, who's gone through loss, who's gone through substance abuse. You've gained all of this knowledge, and now you're the head of coaching at Sharp, and you're doing it for thousands of people. And I swear I've had no less than 100 different people tell me that Steve Bunting has changed my life. How does that feel? And talk to us about coaching. Talk to us about what it is you do and why it works. Take the audience through the process of how we're reaching people, how you're reaching people.
When I had my experience with the mental health community through the VA, I just felt like the system was just broken in a lot of sense. Maybe I was broken. But along my journey working with the nonprofits, I had a mentor kind of share with me this principle of kind of the Hindu caste system, right? How they have their different caste system, right, wrong, or indifferent. But part of that caste system is the Kshatriya class, which is the warrior class. And he told me, he's like, hey, you're Kshatriya. You're the warrior class. You're the one responsible for kind of managing whether we go to war or we don't go to war, and kind of taking care of that class. Right. And it really resonated with me. Because what I noticed, in some of these therapy sessions, they just didn't understand me. They didn't understand the dark humor. They didn't understand the unique coping skills or the way my brain worked a certain way or why I reacted certain ways to anxiety and these things, mainly why we have that anger response to it.
Right.
And I kind of took that as a challenge and a call to service. It's hey, I'm Kshatriya and I need to work with these warriors. I keep looking at these academics or politicians or someone else to save us. I was and it was a call to action for me to step up and fulfill that role for my brothers and sisters, to fulfill that role, to come in there. So as I became obsessed with that, I became a marriage and family therapist and I started working with people. I kind of started teaching them these same principles that were taught to me, right? When we incorporated the operator syndrome framework and put a name to it, it almost gave us a structure of how to approach these things. I call it the basics and the low hanging fruit, whether it be your sleep, just the role that your diet and all these things that we just shared plays a role in our overall quality of life. And I just became even more obsessed with it. Yeah. So as I'm on this journey, almost in a divine way, I got to meet, by way of you, got to meet Andrew and came on the team. When we started, I had for the first time, it's I had this idea, I had this belief system of us showing up for this warrior class. Right. I believe that our first responders, our cops, firefighters are protectors as well, and they're in that warrior class. So it was a no-brainer for me to come on the team and start building this program and kind of doing it. And as I get in there, I'll be honest with you, Max, I was kind of scared, right? I had imposter syndrome. I was what do I know? I'm passionate, I've done the work, but it's now I'm in this position where it's I kind of got to practice what I preach and show up and maybe these things work. And as I got in there, we start working through this process, right? Helping people take care of the basics, really sitting and just sharing that space and giving someone an opportunity to really just tell their story, man.
Right.
With no obligation to fix anything. We're not diagnosing anyone. I'm not assessing them for fit for duty, right? It's all these things that kind of classically trained in therapy were so important. We were able to remove that from the process and allowed me to actually just be present. Dude, I wish there was magic, Max. I wish there was some magic process that I was doing, but I believe that, a lot of my success has been able to just show up and be present.
Right.
Show up and just have the same look in my eyes. And when I have the opportunity to say me too, I do.
Right.
When my story kind of enmeshes with their story and it's very common, I get to share it, which is something that's difficult on the therapy side of the house, right? It's where there's rules about self-disclosure. There's rules about this transference, counter-transference, and being aware of that. And where in coaching, I got to show up and just be a part of their life almost like hold their hand and walk on this path with them,
Right.
with no obligation to fix anything or label them or any of that. There's no insurance involved. It was like there's almost this freeing part of it that really allowed me to thrive in that space. Is parts of being a therapist is like maybe I didn't agree with or resonate with that I was able to like kind of do in coaching, which I think has led to a little bit of my success.
Right.
That I'm very humble about.
There's two things that come up for me with everything you just said. And I think I heard them both from different department psychologists along the way. The first is you can only take a person as deep as you've gone yourself.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's just so powerful to be able to take all these life experiences from your childhood to now, because, it's as simple as just showing up and making space and listening to a person, but like you couldn't have done that if you hadn't made it through all this adversity, all this loss. So yeah, you've gone through all this loss, you've dealt with all this adversity, and you've always been a healer, right? Naturally empathic at a young age because of trauma, gravitating towards bringing your brother with you and trying to keep him close. You're going through medic school. You want to be a surgeon. You go back to contracting, which you're also, acting as a person who's a medic, as well as contracting, and then called to do this therapeutic position. I mean, it really feels like you are following a pretty defined path most of your life that maybe you didn't even realize, but now just the impact that you're making in people's lives is just tremendous. I mean, just sitting down and talking with you, Steve, I love it. You have a very natural, healing thing about you. To wrap it up, I want to talk about the coaches that you've put together and the body of work that they've accomplished and what's next. Who are the rest of the coaches that, Steve's the head of coaching, and there's a lot of other coaches with a lot of other disciplines, from nutrition to athleticism stuff, teaching people about physical fitness to leadership and cultural development and just holding space for people in more of a therapeutic sense. Talk to us about them.
Yeah, I'd love to. Something I've been very blessed in as well is that when I kind of got into this mental health community, I developed a lot of friends, and I got to see a lot of people that were on this path too, on this journey. When I was kind of tasked out with building this team, it was an easy call for me to call up some of these people that are working in this space, doing tremendous work already, and bring them on. Many of our coaches are prior, special operations veterans, prior veterans, and they come in with their own story to tell, where they've been through some stuff. It's very important for us, for our coaches, to have that lived experience. They have been able to overcome some things. They have their own practice, stuff that they believe in, that they're not just like kind of repeating off of, other podcasts that they hear or books that they hear, but they actually have like a real lived practice that they do to show up in a space for people and really like provide that container for them to feel safe and vulnerable, which is necessary. I think a lot of the things when it comes to how we run our confidentiality and stuff allows us to really break through some of these barriers as well. Our coaches are so tremendous. They're so awesome. And they come from many different walks of life. We've expanded our coaching staff to even include, law enforcement officers as well and firefighters. And the main requirement for what we're looking for is just a passion to walk along our brothers and sisters, to be a part of that Kshatriya tribe that takes care of the warriors and comes up with no obligation to know the answers. If anything, I would say we're just lucky enough to get to witness someone go through this healing process, right, and to help be someone on that path with them and walk with them. We couldn't do it without the coaches that we have. They have this calling, and the calling that I found that I'm so grateful for, Max. The idea of being a surgeon, is just I can't even imagine that was in my thought process, knowing what I know now. Right. The way I get to show up for people and see the miracles happen, see those sparks come back in their eyes, and see their families repair, see them thrive in their occupational careers, picking up rank, and just seeing them live with this new renewed sense of purpose. Dude, I'm so grateful every day that I get to show up, and any person that allows me to be a part of their life, even for just a couple sessions, I'm tremendously grateful. And I know I echo that for our coaches as well. The opportunity to show up, practice what we preach, have purpose, actually do something we believe in, right? We're not just doing something because we're in a uniform and we have to, but this is every day I get a vote. And I wake up and I show up, and our coaches wake up and they show up, and they get to be a part of something really special and get to really make a difference. Yeah. And for that, I'm so grateful, dude. Yeah. So grateful. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest misses in what each one of these communities was trying to to do. You know, everybody's trying. You know, I really see a lot of effort from the first responder community, from the military and special forces community. Is they are putting systems in place. It's definitely not a lack of want or try, but I do think there's a deep lack of understanding. And what's very special that I've seen about our coaches is that they were normal people first. They lived traumatic, diverse, hard lives for a very long time before they answered the call. They went on their own hero's journey, right? They had to experience these tough things in order to understand the tough things that each one of you are going through. So I would just highly encourage every single person who's listening to this, everybody who's interested about sharp performance, like, take a risk on yourself and show up for a coaching session. You know, it is 30 minutes of your life, and I'll put any amount of money I have, which unfortunately is not very much, that you're going to have a really, really positive experience, that you're going to walk away with an insight that you've never had, because each one of these people have done the work and they're willing to sit down and do it with you. So if there's one thing to wrap the whole thing up, what would you tell anybody who's listening? What would you tell them about what they can do right now? Like, what's the first step that they can take to show up for themselves, whether it's for a leadership way, it's for just anything, you know, what's your biggest takeaway from going on this journey?
I would just say that it's never too late to start taking care of yourself, right? To give yourself permission to take care of yourself and to hold yourself in the highest regard, really fall in love with yourself, really practice it, like just taking care of yourself, and it affects everybody around you. Right. When you really start to heal, one, it's contagious. And just that healing energy of you taking care of yourself, you'll see it in everyone around you. And you deserve it. It's your birthright to take care of yourself and live well. So, you know, I would just encourage you to do that. And even just taking the first step is such a powerful move.
I love it. That's another episode. This is Steve Bunting. He's the head of coaching at Sharp Performance. So lucky to have you, man. So just lucky to know you. I love you and can't wait to continue this thing, bro.
Yeah, love you too, Max. Thank you.